Now, ever since Andor Season 2 ended, I've had this fear, you could call it, that we're never going to get anything quite like it ever again out of Star Wars. Or anything that well written and on that level of complexity or maturity, you could even say. Or something that's just that damn good all around. Though at the same time, as I always say, no, I don't think everything Star Wars going forward should try to be exactly like Andor. There's absolutely room for a lot of different types of stories in this franchise. I also do understand that for a few different reasons, whether I agree with them or not. Not everyone loved or enjoyed Andor or wants something like that again in the future. Which you could even argue is actually one of the main problems this franchise faces, that fans want or expect or even demand different things from it or have different definitions of what it is or should be. That what one fan finds exceptional and wants more of, another fan might find boring or too slow-paced or lacking a certain Star Wars feel. Unfortunately, there's just not a ton of things all Star Wars fans agree upon. And thus, it's never going to be easy to make a piece of Star Wars content that all fans are going to approve of, or have them all saying in unison, yes, this is something I think is Star Wars and would love to see. Or is it? Is there maybe something that actually already exists that just might check a few or a lot of boxes for virtually all fans? Something we'd all agree we wanted and, if done right, would make the perfect Star Wars series on Disney+. That being an adaptation of the Darth Plagueis novel. And no, this isn't a new idea or anything. I'm far from the first one to suggest something like this. Hell, I've suggested all of this before, but this time I want to make a really strong case for it. Not that Disney and Lucasfilm are ever going to listen to me, but I want to make the argument nonetheless because I honestly do think it would be one of the smartest things they could possibly do, and something pretty much all fans would very much want. Assuming, and this is a big assumption, they could get it right and they could get James Luceno, the author of the book, on board as well. Which I'd imagine he'd be all for, considering he's written almost a dozen Star Wars books at this point, and yeah, he seems like a pretty big fan and a very knowledgeable one at that. Involving him in this project is a must in order to keep the integrity of that book intact. Not that a few things can't be changed or tweaked here and there, or where they're needed, and we'll get into some of that. But the book, in and of itself, as is a masterpiece. One of the best books in Star Wars anywhere, whether it be new canon or old. And so you really don't want some up-and-coming writer looking to make a name for themselves, coming in and trying to reimagine it. You want the original author to be there helping with the story and script and keeping the core of the book that he wrote intact. We don't just want him in name alone either. The whole, we consulted him for like 5 minutes and can now attach his name in order to make those who care about that sort of thing happy and to give it some legitimacy. Instead, actually get him involved in creating this so that his vision that worked so well in the written form can be accurately translated to screen. Because honestly, the Plagueis novel was kinda Andor before Andor in the Star Wars universe. It is certainly a darker, more complex, character-driven story that has its fair share of political intrigue. Not that other stories in the EU didn't also have all of that, or have the Andor vibe. But if one book could be turned into something very similar to Andor, making those fans who really just want something like that someday again, it would almost certainly be the Plagueis novel. And even though it doesn't have a ton of action, which is a complaint against Andor, or that some who didn't like that show make, there is some in there, and a lot of it is Star Wars-y action. There are lightsabers and Force use. It has those things that Andor lacks, and that some people say is the reason that show doesn't feel Star Wars enough for them. Furthermore, you could certainly add a bit more action and just more in general if you really wanted to, because one of the issues the story might have as it is transitioned to the screen is that book primarily follows, or pretty much entirely follows, just the story of Plagueis and Sidious, or Higo, Damask, and Sheev Palpatine. It is entirely from their point of view. And so another sort of storyline, or 2 or 3, however many you think would fit without really ruining the integrity of the book or altering the story too much, could certainly be created and added, again with the help of James Luceno preferably. And maybe you add another politician character, or you take one from the book already in there and explore them more, as well as adding the perspective of a Jedi character or 2, with Count Dooku being an excellent choice, I think, to be included in this. Basically, this series could be what The Acolyte could have and really should have been. It could be something that really shows the dark side perspective, that digs deep into Sith philosophy and gives us a story from their point of view, what they really think and feel, without then making the Sith sympathetic and looking like they're somehow justified in doing horrible things because the Jedi are just as bad as they are, kind of like the Acolyte did. While at the same time, again, giving us the Jedi perspective via Dooku, and the perspective of one we know is going to eventually fall and become a Sith himself. Though his story, Dooku's story, could obviously involve training Qui-Gon Jinn and showing how he will eventually become the Jedi we ultimately see in The Phantom Menace, and his inclusion, Qui-Gon's inclusion, could certainly enhance the character for those who did enjoy that movie, and have always wanted more from him, but have never gone back to read any of these stories in the EU or elsewhere about him. And speaking of the Acolyte here, if we did get something like this, if we actually got an adaptation of the Plagueis novel, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I wouldn't even care if at some point it made reference to that series, so that, in a way, this could be a second season of that show that the fans have so desperately wanted. I would make that sacrifice so that the dozen fans who enjoyed The Acolyte could perhaps be happy. And I'm certainly not saying you go all in on that, but I would be fine with, I don't know, Plagueis at some point mentioning a vergence in the Force he has heard about or encountered before that took the form of twins. He doesn't even have to mention them by name, so we can, if we want, assume he's not even talking about Osha and May. But he can say he encountered a different vergence in the Force, and that he has incorporated that knowledge into his research, and that it is a precursor to a much more powerful vergence in the Force that he eventually helps create, or that it's heavily implied he helps bring about when trying to manipulate the midichlorians to create life. That, of course, obviously being Anakin Skywalker. This would also then be a really good time to finally explain what midichlorians actually are, because a lot of fans have hated them since their introduction in The Phantom Menace, in large part, I think, because they misunderstand what they even are. I've seen plenty of people over the years who think they are the Force, or they generate it, or something along those lines, and that is not it at all. So that misconception around them could finally be cleared up. Not to mention, if Disney didn't throw away George Lucas's story treatments for the sequels that he gave them when he sold Lucasfilm to them, and that he was led to believe they were going to use, some of his further ideas when it comes to the microbiotic realm could be explored in this series as well, because his trilogy, his sequels, were, according to him, going to dig pretty deep into all of that. Thus, fans who want anything relating to what Lucas was going to do with the sequels and how he sees the Force, again, this microbiotic realm, well, you could get a little taste of that. In other words here, I really believe turning this novel into a series, again, as long as they do get James Luceno on board and they do it right, no half-assing it or adding anything that really doesn't need to be in there, beyond the few changes I mentioned, and maybe some other additions or tweaks here and there, to fit it neatly with the new canon or to expand the story in ways that are fitting the original story. Anyway, turning this novel into a series could be something for everybody, something all fans would be excited for, something that those who loved Andor could enjoy just as much as those who, right or wrong, think Star Wars has to include lightsabers or Jedi and Sith and all that stuff to make it feel like something that belongs in the universe. Not to mention, it involves some of the most popular and beloved characters in the entire franchise, like Palpatine, for example. Only it's not somehow bringing him back after he's died, it's showing the journey he took to become one of the most powerful Sith of all time, under the tutelage of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Well, I think that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think. Would you, assuming they can do it right, would you like to see the Plagueis novel turned into a series? And would you add or change things to make it more fitting for the small screen, or would you keep it pretty much exactly the same? Or maybe you've never read the Plagueis novel and you're just excited to finally see it and know about it. Whatever the case may be though, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.